All right, good afternoon and welcome to. Yes, I do. Who's on? Is it on now? All righty. All right, good afternoon and welcome to K-12 Education Budget. We are going to be hearing 3 bills today, 3 small bills. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Note to committee, I do have an announcement of how we are going to proceed on bill amendments for when it's time to work our bills. So I will do that at the very conclusion of our meeting today. Let's go ahead and have our reviser, Nick, give us an overview of House Bill 2602, providing an alternative calculation of graduation rates for virtual schools based on students' earned credits at the time of enrollment in the virtual school. Yes, Representative.
And Madam Chair, thank you. And before Nick gets started, I'd like to have, for the record, each of these bills moving forward to at least have the names of those who sent us emails as a record of proponents or opponents. Do you need that I wouldn't think you need that in a motion.
I'm not sure if I understand what you mean.
Okay, we get 1,000 emails, especially on the bills we're hearing.
Sure.
Some are proponents, some are opponents. Can we include that in the record as official proponent?
Only if they send it to you as testimony and they submit it as testimony in the approved amount of time, 24 hours in advance.
Okay.
And that has to go to Holly. So that's the way we do it. And that's how it's done in pretty much every committee.
Well,
so otherwise, if we all send emails, then we could flood each other's inbox with proponent and opponent. And then we could, then Holly, my assistant, would have to spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of uploading into the system. So it's not just that it's emailed to you, it's uploaded onto the S drive. There's more that it entails. So if there's a difference between contacting each of us and advocating and producing testimony. Okay. And so we, individuals that desire to submit testimony need to look at the criteria for submitting testimony, and they can do so.
And I appreciate your explanation, and I will continue. I will forward that information to the individuals that send the emails to the committee members. It's not to me personally, but that's okay. So thank you very much.
You are welcome. Nick, you may go ahead and proceed and give us an overview of House Bill 2602.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee, as the chair said, 2602 would amend the Virtual School Act to require that a virtual school's graduation rate calculation should only include those students who enrolled in the virtual school with sufficient credits to be expected to graduate in that same school year as that student's cohort group. This would require that graduation rate calculation to be done only for state level accreditation purposes. And committee, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you, Nick. Any questions for our reviser on this very complicated bill? No questions at this moment. Thank you. All right, committee, I will now formally open House Bill 2602 for a hearing, and we'll begin with our proponent oral testimony. Representative Adam Thomas, would you like to take the stand?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Oh, I can sum it up in 10 seconds. I'm not worried about it. No, I want to thank you all, obviously, for hearing me out today and for allowing me to testify. I want to thank Principal Barton for being here as well. I know also Dr. Burke was in here earlier. Essentially, what I want to say about 2602 is we need to make sure that our virtual schools are not only treated fairly, but also the graduation rate that impacts districts as a whole. For example, right now, and I'm sure Principal Barton will get into this as well, we have credit deficient students that are coming to our virtual schools. And as we know through state statute, they finish, their graduation rate is impacted at the school they finish at. So when we're sending students, 117, I believe, went to Insight, and more than a third of, or 68% of them are credit deficient. And who pays the cost for that, the graduation rate? The Spring Hill School District. So what this bill does is creates a separate graduation rate that excludes those that are credit deficient. So you will then see the two graduation rates side by side. You'll see the actual graduation rate and the graduation rate with those credit deficient students excluded from it. It's a very simple bill, very simple idea. We want to make sure that one district doesn't suffer because students are coming in to their virtual schools across the state credit deficient. So that's essentially the nuts and bolts of 2602. I do want to also point out that, you know, it was asked of me this week, does Spring Hill have to take these schools? They're public schools, so yes, they need to take these students. But they're doing a noble thing. They're taking students that are coming here as, a lot of them, it's their last resort, and we're saying, we're going to take you in, we're going to coach you along, we're going to get you on the right path. You may be a year or two behind, but we're going to get you there. And I think it's admirable what they do, and I certainly appreciate, as I said earlier, what Principal Barton is doing. But with that, we've got to do something to make this right, and I think 2602 does just that. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Representative. We will take questions at the end of the proponent testimony. Next up, we have Cassandra Barton, Head of School, Insight School of Kansas. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee, I am Cassandra Barton. I serve as head of school for Insight School of Kansas and Kansas Virtual Academy. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today in support of House Bill 2602, and I appreciate you taking the time to discuss options to help virtual schools and the districts that authorize them to continue to be accredited and support not only students within their physical boundaries, but across the state as well. Insight is one of around 60 virtual schools and programs in the state, which serves high school grade levels. Around 40 of those serve students outside of their physical district boundaries. Currently, we are serving students residing in over 120 districts other than our own. We are authorized by USD 230 Spring Hill School District. Insight exists to serve as an option for students who need something other than their current schooling situation. That brings everything. Every student has their own story. Yes, we get students who are doing a great job, on track, rocking and rolling, and have some outside interests and want extra time to pursue those. But we also bring in students who are credit deficient, students who have gaps in their schooling progression, students facing non-academic struggles that have a big impact on their academics, transient students, and so on and so forth. That, of course, has impacted our graduation rate. We've worked really hard to improve, and as we did a deeper analysis of our previous graduation rates, we found that over 68% of our non-graduates each year come to us not on track to graduate on time with their four-year cohort. When they don't graduate on time, that does get taken into account in our graduation rate, which makes it go down. Even if we're able to help some of those students, wrap it up maybe a semester later, a year later, our four-year cohort graduation rate remains the same. When the state moved to a district-wide accreditation process, our authorizing district was suddenly at risk of losing accreditation for the entire district because of Insight's graduation rate. While it's admittedly not where we want it to be, we have worked hard and we've made great strides. I was able to share with you, some of you in December, and again, our graduation rate in 2021 was 63.3%, which is a 37.6 improvement over the course of 5 years. Spring Hill High School's graduation rate is consistently in the upper 90s, so we do have an impact. In spring of 2019, we were working together to set a goal and have a district graduation rate of at least 67% by cohort 2021. But we didn't meet that goal. We far surpassed it, and we had a graduation rate of 78.3 in 2021. However, despite that, exceeding our goal, demonstrating growth over several years, we worry that our accreditation is still threatened due to Insight's graduation rate still not being quite where we want it to get. This is where House Bill 2602 would come in and assist us virtual schools and their authorizer districts. It does not change the statewide graduation rate calculation formula, and we understand that. It does not retroactively change graduation rates of other schools, and we understand that as well. It's just another metric that we feel gives us a better idea of how we're doing with the kiddos that are coming to us, kind of where they should be as far as their cohort goes, and then also allows us to look at how we're doing with those kiddos who are behind, aren't going to make it on time, but may make it sometime down the road past that 4-year cohort. So it creates a second graduation rate for virtual schools only and only for the purpose of accreditation. It allows us to be measured only for the students who enroll with us who are on track for graduating with their 4-year cohort. So if Cassie Barton comes to us from Valentine High School, 3 credits behind, doesn't quite wrap it up by the end of the 4th year of being in high school, but wraps it up that next semester, we would still take that quote unquote hit on the graduation rate for the overall graduation rate, but Cassie Barton from Valentine High School would be factored out when looking at us for accreditation. Had the second graduation rate calculation, such as the one proposed in this bill, been run during the 2021 cohort, our graduation rate would have jumped to 79% for Inside School of Kansas. House Bill 2602 will help us maintain our accreditation and thus our ability to serve kids, which is really what we want to do. We want to help those students and families who are looking for something else, need something else for whatever reason, and want to give virtual schooling a try. We appreciate your time today and we ask for your support. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Absolutely. You can go ahead and remain there just in case there's a question directed to you. If they're directed to Representative Thomas, you may answer those at your seat. And committee, what questions do you have for our proponents? Representative Estes, please designate who you would like to answer.
My first question is for Representative Thomas. So when I try to understand what you want to do, you want to maintain the status quo by keeping the current graduation rate scheme in place. You want to add a new scheme that only applies to virtual.
Correct. This would create a new formula that excludes those credit deficient students, and that would be the one that determines when you're talking accreditation and also compared to the school district as a whole. Yes.
Thank you, because I was concerned when I looked at some of the written testimony, proponent testimony. I'm like, are we treating brick and mortar the same? And you feel like we are? Okay. I'll let somebody else take a turn if you want to come back to me.
Okay, and so that new item would be the adjusted cohort graduation rate. Other questions? Okay, Representative Estes.
I have one more for our speaker. You mentioned that 60-something% of the kids are coming to you credit deficient.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, what time of the year do you find most students come to you? Senior year starts and they're coming to you at the beginning of the year? They want to get this done, or do they get towards the end of the school year, find out they're not going to make it, and then they turn to you? Do you see a pattern?
We have an enrollment season that opens in the January of each calendar year and closes in September for our high school students, usually end of first week of September. So they're coming in during that time frame.
Okay, and they would be prohibited from joining later on in the year?
Yes, yeah.
Is that true of most virtual schools?
I can't speak to that. I'd have to look at the list.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, ma'am, for being here today with the testimony. I'm a proponent of, as they say, do something that does something. And I appreciate you educating me here today. Can you help me understand, I'm a little new at this, what exactly is the reason that Spring Hill has all of the virtual schools?
We don't have all of them, but we have one of the biggest ones. And we are unique in that our high school, virtual high school, I should say, is very similar in size to our brick and mortar high school. So when you put our graduation rates together, the virtual school graduation rate definitely has an impact.
And that's the nut of my question. Exactly. What is the impact that this bill, if it were to pass, how would that help you?
Well, if we were looking at 2021, I don't remember exactly where Spring Hill High fell, but it was upper 90s. And then we were at 63.3 for our final graduation rate for that cohort. So together it was 78.3. If this calculation was in place, our piece of it would have been 79%. So that would have taken us, yes, as a district, it would have made it higher. Yep, significantly.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I know that we're all about achievement here, so thank you for the opportunity.
And I think we're also about just making sure we're accurately reflecting what is happening. And so with your testimony, and as Representative Estes mentioned, you said 68% of your non-graduates come to Insight credit deficient. If we're trying to be fair with brick and mortar, I sincerely doubt that a freshman enters the brick and mortar 68% credit deficient. And therefore, it is not the same thing. And it's actually a really good solution. I know that there's been discussions on how to create a solution in the past, but this seems to make sense. Any other questions? Representative Estes for the last question.
I'm not sure who to direct this question to because I kind of think it really belongs to Craig, so I don't know if the chair wants it or not. But is there a master list somewhere of what schools are sending credit deficient to the virtual schools?
That's a great question, Craig. If you can answer that, I think we're up to around 130 some virtual schools. But if Craig would like to comment on that or whether or not you could provide that information, that would be helpful.
Short answer from here, we do not have that information. What credit students have when they transfer.
Okay, so but I'm it's probably that, for example, in Insight, you could probably give us an idea of where some of your students are transferring from. Would you be able to respond to Representative Estes' question?
Yeah, I don't know that there would be a comprehensive list like statewide, but I know our virtual school, we do a transcript analysis for every student that comes in so we can make sure we're scheduling them appropriately and getting them to that graduation finish line, so to speak, as quickly as possible. So we would know where they were coming from and how deficient and how many.
And part of the approach in this bill, I think, we have the status quo still there, but this gives us added information. And I think that if the State Department were able to take the information as we're making these calculations separately, so we could look for trends on where we're finding credit deficient students. I think those are measurements that would all help us to devise our policy in a better way. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, if there are no further questions for our proponents, then I will close the proponent section of our hearing and open the opponent section. We have opponent written testimony from Dina Horst and Ben Jones, legislative liaisons for the Kansas State Board of Education, and you should have received that via email. Committee, there are no other opponent testimonies that I have received. Is there anyone in the audience that we might have missed? There is no neutral testimony. So if there are no other items for House Bill 2602, I will close the hearing on House Bill 2602. Committee, please also note that you do have a fiscal note included, and there was no fiscal impact to KSD or the schools. Committee, I would turn your attention to House Bill 2615 and invite Nick to go ahead and provide an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee, House Bill 2615 would authorize boards of education of school districts to adopt policies to allow students enrolled in grades 6 through 12 to earn course credits through alternative educational opportunities with sponsoring entities in that district. The bill would provide certain definitions for these terms. So an alternative educational opportunity would mean instruction that primarily occurs outside the classroom with a sponsoring entity and is approved and meets course content standards as determined by the State Board of Education. A sponsoring entity would mean any business, not-for-profit organization, nonprofit organization, trade association, parent of a student, teacher, or administrator that partners with a school district to provide this alternative educational opportunity to students. Under this bill, school districts would be required to establish a policy to provide for these alternative educational opportunities, or could, if they chose to do this, they would have to establish a policy to provide for these alternative educational opportunities. And this policy would require the school district to put forth eligibility requirements for sponsoring entities, requirements for the provision of those alternative educational opportunities, procedures for a sponsoring entity to submit a proposal to provide that educational opportunity, criteria to evaluate those proposals, accountability measures for those educational opportunities, and then the course credit that may be earned through that opportunity. This bill would authorize a school district to accept a proposal from a sponsoring entity if the educational opportunity provided an additional learning opportunity through a work-based, pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship, internship, industry certification, or a community program that improves the academic success of the students. The bill would require a licensed teacher within the school district to generally supervise this program. And if a school district approves a proposal for an alternative educational opportunity, the school district would be required to submit that proposal to the State Board of Education. And the State Board of Education would have 90 days to make a decision upon whether to approve or deny that school district's proposal. The State Board of Education would continue to oversee the provisions of that school district's proposal along with the school district, and the State Board would continue to have oversight authority in that they could terminate an alternative educational opportunity if the State Board finds that the provisions of the school district's policies are not being met or the program fails to comply with some of those requirements. The bill would also finally require that the school district has to report information to the State Department of Education on the proposals and the alternative educational opportunities that the school district is providing, the names of the sponsoring entities that are being used in the school districts, and the number of students participating, and the number of credits earned through those programs. And Madam Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Committee, do you have any questions for our reviser? All right, Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any place, I'm sorry I didn't see it and I didn't hear you or read it, are there any state assessments required of the student to verify comprehension of any learning outcomes or anything?
No, there's no provision for state assessments through these educational opportunities. This would be a separate course credit that could be earned by a student for a work-based learning opportunity.
Okay. Thank you.
So essentially, they would continue taking their state assessments if they were enrolled full-time, just like any other student. This would just be a supplemental way to take a course if it were approved and get credit for it outside school hours.
Yes, this would be a way to get approved for this course, and it may, the bill doesn't discuss whether it's within school hours or outside of school hours. It's this educational opportunity that could be provided to a student through one of these sponsoring entities. But yes, Madam Chair, you're correct. The state assessment program would continue for that student who is enrolled in the district, and that student would have to take the assessments for their grade level. So the grade, this is specific for grades 6 through 12. So they'd be taking those assessments for those grade levels, the grade 10 reading and math assessments, and the grade 11 science and social studies assessments.
Representative Nguyen.
So thank you very much. So give me an example of a credit earned.
It would just be a credit, maybe an elective credit that the student could get.
Okay.
And so this would just be a course credit the student could earn in school towards their credit requirements.
Okay.
And I think it will make a little bit more sense once we hear from our conferees. So Okay, if there are no further questions, thank you, Nick. We will now proceed to open our hearing on House Bill 2615, authorizing school districts to provide alternative educational opportunities outside of the classroom for course credit. We'll begin with the proponent oral testimony. Again, we have Representative Adam Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me this one chance to come up here and talk to you about a bill. So, thank you so much. And this bill, known as the Learn Everywhere Plan, could just have, in my opinion, such a huge impact on our kids. I mean, we're talking about the last 2 years, we're seeing opportunities in our workforce, businesses being shut down, restaurants running with skeleton crews, a short supply of toilet paper from our friends at Charmin. All of these things lead us, in my opinion, to this point, the impact we could have on the future. We talk about how there's a workforce problem now, people returning to work, lots of jobs open, but people just not wanting to work. I think we're starting in the wrong area. I think we need to look at our future generations, and we need to set them up better for success. And I think this bill does exactly that by allowing kids to earn credit outside of the classroom, but also develop a work ethic. Quick backstory on me, my wife and I owned a small restaurant. No alcohol was served. My daughter was 14, 15 years old, started there, and she now has developed, in my opinion, a phenomenal work ethic. She's 17. She knows when she goes to a restaurant to tip her server. She expects her friends to do the same. And so I think by passing this legislation, we could make a similar impact on so many other kids by just allowing them to develop like I said, a work ethic and have that practice for when they graduate and become adults. So that is the nature of this bill, and I would certainly urge you to support it. And I look forward to talking with you about it, and I will happily stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Representative. We will give you that opportunity at the end of the proponent testimony section. Jennifer Javia, did I pronounce that correct? Javia, welcome. She is from Government Affairs Manager. Yes, every kid.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Williams and distinguished members of the K-12 Education Budget Committee. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jennifer Javia, as you said, and I represent Yes, Every Kid. We work to help ensure every student has access to an individualized education. I'm here to speak in support of HB 2615, Learn Everywhere. We applaud the efforts this body has taken to propel Kansas forward by empowering students and educators. Thank you for advancing public policy that gives educators and community opportunities to give credit-bearing experiences outside of the classroom to Kansas students. Learn Everywhere will provide the opportunity for a wide variety of experiences and educational methods that has the potential to transform a student's life, allowing all students in Kansas to realize their full potential, to discover, develop, and apply their innate gifts to maximize their ability to contribute to society. Learn Everywhere does not preclude schools from creating additional educational opportunities for students. In fact, the program takes absolutely nothing away from schools. This act merely creates an avenue for students to receive credit for learning that happens outside the traditional classroom. 6 states have passed a similar program: Alabama, Indiana, Mississippi, New Hampshire, North Dakota, and West Virginia. At least another 10 are working on passing this program this session. As I mentioned, Learn Everywhere expands the educational opportunity universe without taking anything away. It sees education for what it should be, an expanding universe of opportunities that can be harnessed to tailor education around the unique needs of a child. Thank you for allowing me to testify. I appreciate the opportunity to address this committee, and most of all, I want to close by again applauding you, this body, and the state for serving as a national leader in the future of education. You have put the needs of students first and reimagined what is possible. I look forward to working with you on this and future legislation that equips all students of all ages at all stages of life with the resources and guidance they need to forge their own path of discovery and development. Just a quick note on that as well. I know we were talking about examples on what a student can use this for. And I'd love to share a couple examples with you if that's okay. So the first example I'd love to share is maybe a freshman or a sophomore trying to figure out what they want to do in life. And they notice that HVAC and plumbing companies are always hiring, right? And they're always looking for people. And he's like, maybe this may be a good career path for me. So he looks at externships and he goes and figures out if that's the right path for him. He learns HVAC and he's like, oh, this is why gas is so important in my chemistry class. This is why I need to learn math to make sure I know how much Freon to add, to make sure I know how to do all this stuff. And at the end of those 4 years, he develops a passion for the industry. And at those end of 4 years, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of states and a lot of HVAC technicians and installers are earning a higher potential than pharmacists and those that are in crazy industries as such. On the opposite, if there was a student that was in 4-H clubs or anything of the sort, they want to get out there and just experience different types of industries, they can go out there and do that. Instead of wasting 4 or 5 years out right after school, they become productive members of society right from day one of graduation. So I'm happy to take any questions or have follow-up conversations after the hearing if needed.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. I'm sure we will have some questions for you. Next up, we have Elizabeth Patton, and she's the State Director of Americans for Prosperity. Welcome.
Hi, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Madam Chair, my name is Elizabeth Patton. I am the State Director for Americans for Prosperity, and I'm here today not only as an advocate through that organization, but also as a mom. I have 4 kids of my own, and as those of you who are also parents, you know that all kids learn differently. All kids are very unique, and the way that they will even continue on their trajectory in life will be different. I love this bill because under the provisions of it, students are able to receive credit for learning that takes place outside of the traditional classroom, plain and simple. As parents, we saw a lot of those opportunities present themselves throughout the pandemic and over the last couple of years, finding creative ways to foster additional learning for our kids. And when we look at opportunities for our state to move forward and continue to modernize and individualize education, because we all know education is truly a key to success, we want to make sure that those barriers remain down for Kansas students so that we don't have a prescriptive, rigid, one-size-fits-all situation for all Kansas students, because as we know, that can very well lead to more students falling through the cracks and an inability for us to be continually flexible as a state in making sure that all students, regardless of circumstance and zip code, have the opportunity to thrive in our state. So I think if we've learned anything else from the last couple of years, that those things have been highlighted for us and that we can think about this a little differently and think about ways where it was previously mentioned, partnerships with nonprofits, with organizations, with apprenticeships, with businesses, and other opportunities that I'm not even thinking of right now with 4-H, with boys and girls clubs, that they all help us look at the goal of our education system, which shouldn't be just standardizing education. The goal is that we ensure and recognize learning where it occurs, and Bill 2516 helps us do that. It helps us create a path. This isn't a mandate. It doesn't mean that even every kid in Kansas is going to do something like this, but it's an opportunity, it's an option, and it's the ability to grow and build on quality education in our state, allow them to, it was said earlier, I wrote it down here, discover, develop, and apply their unique talents. I thought that was a great line, and I just wanted to emphasize that so that we can help make sure that Kansas students are able to find lifelong fulfillment and contribute to not only their community, but our state in the way that best fits their strengths. And so with that, I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and I think that is a great line as well. So committee, that is, we have 3 proponent oral testimony. I don't think I missed anyone, have I? With that, committee, I'll open it up for questions for any one of these conferees. Representative Nguyen, please
Thank you, Madam Chair.
let us know which one you would like to ask.
Tavia? And again, thank you for helping me understand a little bit better of this bill. And I get exactly what you said. My question is one, I guess, of process. What credit, exactly the credit would that student receive? Now, the revisor says elective. Okay, I get that. But I don't understand, I don't get the impression you're thinking of it as an elective. Am I correct?
The way the bill is written at this time, it can be either for a core credit or for an elective credit. There are two different opportunities a child can receive. So if we're looking at an opportunity like my niece is just incredibly bright, and she's 12 years old, doing calculus, just doing one of those things, and she goes to a charter public school in Arizona, where I'm from, and it's just not as compelling for her to be in her school class, even if she was up a couple grade levels. She can take, with this type of bill, she can find an online source or an in-person tutor that will take her to her grade level of learning, and then she would earn a math credit in a core credit in school.
Sure. But take me back to your HVAC example. What core credit would, in your brain, do you see that student receiving?
Sure. And it's going to depend on how the rules are promulgated, but at this time, I've seen it in the past be a general core, like an elective credit. So like, for example, a typical student in high school would have 2 elective credits that they can either take Spanish or shop class or ballet class or anything of the sort. Instead of doing that at their school, if their school doesn't offer it, they can go outside of school and find an opportunity that better suits their style.
Thank you. Thank you.
Committee, other questions? Representative Estes.
Thank you. This one is for Representative Thomas. With a compliment for the State Board of Education in there, I'm really glad that you guys have also been thinking about this, and so Craig may actually need to answer your question again. But when I looked at your bill and the list of types of things in there, I see that it is very broad. So is the State Department of Education's list of what a student may pursue as broad as your bill's intends?
I believe that would be up to the state board to decide. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, and similarly, decisions about who gets credit, what kind of credit would go back to state board as well?
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, the bill, Nick, you can correct me, but the bill does first start with the local board, and then it's ultimately approved by the state board. Is that correct?
Yes, so the school districts have the option to adopt a policy to allow for these activities. And I will mention that in the definition of an alternative educational opportunity, it has to be approved and meet course content standards as determined by the State Board of Education.
Okay. Okay, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This type of training is awesome, and strong supporter. I know our Kansas City, Kansas Community College Career Technical Education Program is awesome, and I'm very pleased with how we're working. As a teacher, what I had to do for my special classes is I had to present a outline for that particular class. For example, I taught a street law class for Wyandotte High School. I had to outline what it was and where we would go and visiting court attendance and different things. Then the school actually has to have it approved by the school board. And I think our representative from the school board in KCK would indicate that every year then they hear new courses that are, and they have to meet some standards. We also had it in the program at Baser Linwood, for example, fire service. So in our public safety career technical programming, every other day my kids that are in the fire service went to the fire station and received their actual training and would graduate with a certification as firefighter 1 before they left. And it was always awesome to watch them. Graduation day, they had to go up the ladder truck to the very top with full gear on. And I see that as such a benefit. Now, I'm not sure on the bill how we're going to fit that in, but I really think there are some processes. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that example. All right, I do have a few questions. And Jennifer, I'll start with you, and then I'm going to ask Brad to come up, if you don't mind. And then if there's any further questions for KSC, we can ask Brad. So Jennifer, can you tell us if other states have had any issues with liability concerns when they're not at school, or if it weren't in school hours, and it would probably be a moot point, but if it were during school hours, is that an issue?
At this time, I'm not sure of any that do have any liability concerns. That's something that I would have to research into and look into, and I would be happy to do so. I would say that upon promulgation of rules and how they are set up, we can definitely include things like making sure that they're background tested, making sure that we're providing those safeguards, because we definitely do want to do that for students out there.
And I do believe that there's a bill still in the Commerce Committee. Is that right, Chairman?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have a bill that we passed through Commerce Committee and then the House floor. It's in the Senate right now, and I think we're gonna conference on it soon. And that allows businesses to open their doors for these types of learning situations where they wouldn't be accepting a bunch of liability when they do so.
So this would pair nicely.
It would, definitely. That's
Okay.
what I was thinking.
Awesome. And one more question for you, Jennifer. So since this exists in at least 6 states and 10 are in process of working on it, you would probably have examples that you could submit to us on what proposals and applications might look like for school boards. So KSDE or in any of the 286 school districts wouldn't have to come up with a policy or a plan from scratch.
Definitely, and that's where yes, every kid shines. We're not one of those companies that comes in and just is very top down. We really like to work and share all of our information and help at any needs that you guys may have.
Would you mind sending us some examples of what those applications might look like? We do have some school board members or on this committee or school board members that have spouses. And so that might be helpful to them in the event it does pass into legislation.
Definitely. I can send some examples of applications as well as guidance on rules that we've put together for other states as well.
That would be great. Thank you.
Of course.
And next, Brad, if you wouldn't mind, I think that would be helpful. Brad, what do you think? Do you think that if this were to pass, do you think there should be a maximum number of alternative credits for students, or would that be restrictive, or what are your thoughts?
I think it depends on each individual student. Districts are already doing this. So issuing credit is a local decision. So we have districts that will have a student that goes to the city in the afternoon to do an internship or work with a local editor at a newspaper or whatever, and they're already earning credits because issuing credits is a local decision. I visited with a music teacher that will issue credit to their students that take piano and organ from a local instructor because they've learned the same competencies that they teach, but just using a guitar in school. So as long as a student can demonstrate competency, it's already happening. But to answer your question, how many, I think that would depend on the individual student. I think it's the rigor to make sure that they're actually learning something that we would deem credit worthy.
Okay, so it'd be just a local decision. And I think that there are probably many districts and many parents that don't know that this is available, or not necessarily a district, but individual parents that their kids might be participating in activities and this is not even something that they're aware of. And so therefore, it's codifying what is already happening in some school districts.
Correct. I think any help, just the examples, we have guidance that helps districts that choose to go this direction, but any additional guidance from other states would be great. The only difference is In this bill, they have to get permission from the state board. Right now, they don't have to. It's the local board that's overseeing the quality of it.
So if that's the case, are we regulating it more than necessary? Or do you think that by actually passing this into legislation, it'll be utilized more frequently, and so the review process would be more helpful?
Well, I think anytime you pass a bill, you draw attention to an opportunity. So I think anytime something comes forward, it gives people, because I still get principals and superintendents say, well, I didn't know we could do that. So anytime that you can bring it to the forefront, the better it is. But again, we have a lot of students earning credits outside of the school. They're just thinking differently about how they go about, whether it's concurrent credit, whether it's, we have districts that the kids doing framing and getting some geometry credit because they're learning slope, circumference, but they're just doing it through building houses, and they've got partnerships with local builders. So it's happening. It's just not as common as we would like to see.
Well, then in that case, I see that the 90 days in which the state board could approve or deny potentially being problematic. Because if someone came in and at the beginning of the school year had a proposal or a plan, had students that were interested, it might be until November before they would know if it was approved. So do you see that this should potentially be revised and the state board approval process be removed?
I think if the more guidance we can provide school districts on how to do this already, that they can already do, but do it of quality, would be fantastic. The ones that are already doing it, if they had to come to the state board, you're probably just adding another hoop for them, to go through, because they already have the authority to approve these types of relationships already.
All right, well, that's good to know. Maybe there's another method just to do a reverse look to be sure that school districts are, not overutilizing it, but utilizing it to the maximum benefit of the students, but in an appropriate way. So, yes.
The way we monitor it is Craig's team, through auditing, every time that they audit a student's equivalency of a schedule, if they're not physically in the building, then they have to show what are they doing outside. And then they look at, well, okay, is the kid just out at the golf course picking up range balls? Is that credit, or are they actually doing something that is credit worthy? And that's taken care of through the auditing process.
So are you telling me you're auditing every student that qualifies for these type of alternative credits?
So now I'm speaking on behalf of Craig's team, but so let's say I've got 200 kids in high school. 12 of them are only showing that they're there 4 hours or 5 hours, not a full day in the building. For me to count them as a full-time student, I have to show, well, then how are they engaged academically outside? And they have to show evidence. So it's only of the ones that are outside of this. If I can see rosters of 195 kids are enrolled in attending a full day, that's good. I've got their schedule, I can kind of desk audit that. But if the kid's not physically there, then they have to show what is it that they're doing. It might be a concurrent course at the community college, great. I just need to see, how do I fund them or count them full-time if they're not there full-time?
That helps, and we might ask Craig to follow up maybe with an email and put some of those bullet points in an email so that perhaps that auditing would take the place of the 90-day review. So Representative Hoffman has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think you answered this with the geometry when you said about geometry. So they're doing it right now, even for course or for core course credits. Correct. This wouldn't be changing. Okay.
Correct.
Do they have to right now? because of that auditing, do they have to let you know that they've got this alternative, or it's just through the auditing that you find it out?
It's just auditing if it's going to affect funding. Because students aren't funded based off credits earned.
Right.
So you can actually have a student that is a full-time 6-period day that earned 8 credits because they also took an online German course. So this is all about how does a student earn a credit? The only time the auditing comes in is if they're not there in school during the period, then they have to justify to be considered a full-time student. But the kid can earn credits way above and beyond. And, you know, if graduation requirements are 21 credits, we have a lot of kids earning 30 credits. So they're going, so it's all about how can I earn a credit? And districts are already doing this right now without having to, but it's done, controlled at the local level.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think through this. If you I would assume at this point, it's probably a fairly small number of students statewide.
Yes.
So if it would continue to grow, then it's going to make your auditing a lot more intensive, I guess, in some ways. So I'm wondering if at least some sort of recognition from the local school board, hey, we've got this program that some of our kids are out of the building for that are getting credit. Would that help you when you go through the audit? Then you see, oh, okay, they have this program. That's what the student is doing.
Yes,
you see what I'm saying?
Yes, we have quite a few districts that were engaged in our redesign, looking at other ways to engage students outside of the traditional classroom. So our auditing team has already been exploring, you know, more efficient ways of maybe monitoring students when they're out on a job site.
Okay.
Or they're doing an internship, job shadowing, all that work-based experience. And what they really care is if they're not physically there for the equivalent of a day, I just need something that shows that they just, again, they weren't picking up range balls at the, you know, that's good, but that may not be fundable. It's got to be at a level where we would say, well, that's then credit bearing worthy to put on a transcript.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so Nick, if you've noticed, we've got some amendments brewing here, and obviously we're not working the bill, but I'm hearing you say that, well, the bill says that the local board has to make the approval. I don't know whether or not local boards have to make approval now, or if a principal can just allow it, but that's not necessary that we answer that. But KSDE reporting might be helpful. Okay. One more question, Representative Estes?
I want to react to a couple of things that you said as a parent of multiple children who graduated. One of them never knew that option was available, had a particular area they were very gifted in, were very passionate about, and the poor teacher in that subject matter every year had to make up things for her to do because that was her purpose for going to school every day. And I wish somebody would have told her that there was an option for her to go intern somewhere and still be satisfactory on her credits. So I appreciate your point about this needs more promotion. I also appreciate your point that it really can vary student by student, and it might backfire to set a regulation or a limit on how many credits a student can get, because it might be what's keeping that kid enrolled in that school. So thank you so much.
And actually, one more question, Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I got my hand up a little bit late. I apologize, but the line of questioning before, I think, brings about the question, what's the fiscal note upon this bill, 2615?
Okay, the fiscal note, I have a copy here. It says any fiscal effect on school districts that would choose to provide alternative education opportunities for course credit would be borne by those school districts. So I would think that they wouldn't be in the hands of the school districts, so it would be, I would think minimus. However, if you notice in the bill, it does say that there will be a licensed teacher that manages it. So it might be a supplemental contract perhaps. And that's my thoughts, but would you like Brad to answer that? That's probably what you meant to do.
Whomever, yeah, please.
Yes, we currently require that already, that a certified teacher, because whoever issues the credit has to be certified to be able to issue a credit. So I'll give an example. I know one high school that they have advanced level 4 welding, but instead of welding hog panels and horse trailers, they're actually doing 3D graphic welding. And when they complete it, the fine arts teacher issues them a fine arts credit in addition because they did all the same competencies that someone does with clay. They just did metal. So they actually get level 4 welding, and they also get an additional fine arts credit because they met and it was those two teachers that wrote the standards and the competencies. So the kid earned 2 credits and never saw the fine arts teacher, but the fine arts teacher knows by observation that but it still has to be the one certified to issue it has to be a licensed teacher. And that happens very similar to the example you gave.
You don't think by promoting this, some school districts are doing this already, and I know they've done it for years. I earned high school credit off the high school campus back in 1995, 96. But by promoting it, do you anticipate more of the auditing done at the departmental level and incurring more work there?
But I would have to have Craig answer that because that's his team that does the auditing.
And we could ask Craig to give it some thought and to send us an email on what you think the impact might be. And it might be that there are some just a very basic type of form that the KSD puts together that can be submitted that might eliminate some of the extra hours and help the auditing process be more streamlined. But Craig, you're welcome to comment or you're welcome to send an email and think on it. Which would you prefer? Door number 2. Excellent. And Brad, how many more days do we have of your presence?
What's today?
It's the 14th. It's Valentine's Day.
No, and I forgot that this morning, so I need help. 25th.
The 25th. Okay. So we look forward to seeing you often before your departure. And thanks for always coming to this committee and giving us good answers. Thank you. All right. If there are no further questions for the proponent oral testimony, we will move on to neutral oral testimony. We have Mark Talman. Talman, come on up. Change your name there. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. You've really analyzed my testimony, so there probably isn't much more to say. As I indicate, we are strongly supportive of this concept. We think it's very much in tune with the whole direction of Kansans Can and school redesign, and you can see some of the statements that our membership has adopted, which raises the question, well then, why aren't you a proponent? And I think, number one, our feeling is districts are already doing this. We're not sure the bill is needed. But we would agree that if we can create more attention to this, more publicity, and give legislative endorsement, that may help districts have more knowledge and be able to expand it. So we do, though, believe that the state board approval is probably not necessary. We don't really know what they'd add, and so I think our recommendation, if you're looking for amendments, would be to remove that requirement of oversight. As you can see, there is still going to be some level of auditing, still would have oversight of a licensed teacher. But I think what we want to do, promote the program, but not add any new bureaucratic steps or hoops that districts will have to go through to do it. So with that, be happy to take questions whenever it's appropriate.
I think you can stay right there because you're the only neutral testimony, and we have a couple questions, Representative Hoffman and Representative Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out that I think this might be the first time that Mark came with not an opposition on one of our bills. It may not be the first time, but it's pretty darn close.
Not the
So
first time in history, but it may be the first time this session. And I'm trying. I think the sponsor told me, I don't know if he wants us to be a proponent of one of his bills.
Yeah.
So we'd want to be careful about that as well.
okay.
Well, I do recall that part-time enrollment, you didn't submit any opposition.
Correct,
So at least
correct.
it was a silent endorsement
That's right.
of that. So Representative Thomas.
No, I appreciate you, Mark, and thank you for the conversations we've had. My question is, so if we were to remove the state board piece of this, you would essentially be on board with this? That's all.
Okay, and so to follow up on that, do you think that there needs to be any reporting of this so that we have some background information for KSDE for other, would it be a benefit for there to be reporting to KSDE on this?
Yeah.
Or would it be cumbersome?
I think the balance is more information is good, but I know school districts feel they've got an awful lot to report already. And maybe part of the question would be, as KSD is maybe getting back to you, what would they do with the report? You know, is it just something that's going to be filed? I do think that KSDE, their school design team, and others are really trying to promote this already. So I think they're already pointing this out. Again, I do think advantage of passing a bill is it's one more way to draw attention. We'll talk about it. Others will talk about it. Just as here's a thing, maybe you could always do it. You clearly could do it, and it would signal, again, legislative approval of the concept. And if it does appear to get if it's either not taking off or maybe going in directions there's a concern, I think you could then come back and revisit if that needs to be done.
All right. Thank you, Mark. We appreciate that. If you notice, committee, we do have one neutral written testimony from Dina Horst and Ben Jones. And as I'm looking at the testimony, I do notice that they too would not like to have the reporting to the State Board of Education. So if you have an opportunity, please take a moment to review. Have I left anyone off of the oral testimony for or against HB 2615? If not, I will go ahead and officially close the hearing on House Bill 2615. All right, thank you, committee. The next item will be House Bill 2649, prohibiting virtual schools from offering or providing a financial incentive for students to enroll in virtual school. And I know it's super easy, but Nick, if you'll walk us through it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, you basically covered it. House Bill 2649 would amend the Virtual School Act. And what it would do is that it would have a provision in there to disallow any virtual school from offering or providing any financial incentive for a student to enroll in a virtual school. So under this Virtual School Act, as you know, these are operated by school districts. So this bill would say that those virtual schools could not offer a financial incentive for students to enroll in those virtual schools. And under the bill, the definition of a financial incentive would be any monetary payment or award that is intended to encourage, entice, or motivate a student to enroll in that virtual school. And I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Any questions for Nick? All right, Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So books, paperwork that we give our virtual school, when they come in, they get the textbooks, et cetera, is that considered?
I think this would be intended for an enticement type of thing, whereas your districts are also providing textbooks and your brick and mortars are doing those same things. But this would be some type of monetary enticement or something to encourage a student to enroll in a virtual school as opposed to another school district.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so we will now open the proponent oral testimonies portion of the House Bill 2649, and we have our one Representative Susan Estes that will provide some testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and fellow committee members. I brought this idea forward because the homeschool community reached out to me, and this was something that they were hearing anecdotally, that some homeschool families were being offered a financial incentive, portion of the funding, the per pupil funding that goes with them, and they reached out to me and said, we're very passionate about protecting homeschooling and a proper use of tax dollars, and we would like to make sure that this does not go on. So that's why I filed the bill. And kind of to answer your question, one of the states that's already dealt with it is Indiana. There was a charter school that was actually offering grocery store cards for people who help to recruit students to their school, to family members who recruited people to the school, and they kind of said, well, we really don't want to go down that road, and they're actually still Indiana's still clearing up their law, because there's some other schools that are offering up to a $1,700 incentive under the guise of some school materials. My bill is more limited. I really don't think that is happening, and I don't want to confuse the two issues. But if a virtual school is saying, enroll your student and we're going to give you X number of dollars for you strictly as an enticement, we want to be proactive in making sure that doesn't happen. And I'll be happy to stand for questions.
All right, questions for, you can actually stay there since you're the only one. Representative Estes, any questions? And I know you brought this forward, so we do appreciate you bringing this bill to our attention. All right, it's pretty clear cut. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, committee, are there any other proponents, opponents, neutral testimony for House Bill 2649 that would like to address the body? There are none.
Mark, do you want to be a proponent?
He wants to be an opponent. No, on the record. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close House Bill 2649. Committee, we're going to do a few housekeeping items here to get us prepared for the next few days. And I mentioned, and it is on our agenda, that we will be meeting and working bills beginning on Thursday. So we have 2 bills left to hear, one tomorrow, and then the Parents' Bill of Rights on Wednesday. So let's talk about amendments. What I would like to ask of the committee is that you have no more than 2 amendments per bill. So you could balloon them together, and that way we won't be here until 11 o'clock at night. The reason I say 2 is sometimes you might have an idea and you want to go for that idea, and then if that doesn't, you might want to have a secondary idea, so they wouldn't work together. So that's why you would at least have 2 shots. So I would highly encourage you to do that, not only for our committee and efficiency, considering the number of bills, but also for Nick, because I know he has a family, and that would be a lot of work for him. So that's a suggestion. To know on that, our committee has never had anyone call the question, which that's when you call the question, you get a second, and then if that passes, then you end debate. And we just haven't done that. I have seen that in other committees, and it is an allowable motion. It is. And so that's another way, by us reducing the number of amendments, then we don't go down that road of calling the question and ending debate. You get the opportunity for your full debate. So I wanted to share that. That's a suggestion or recommendation, and you can do with it what you may. The next item I wanted to mention would be House Bill 2262. It's the Parents' Bill of Rights, and there are at least 2 to 3 versions on the Senate side. So you may be getting emails relating to any of them, and there's some overlap between the 2. But I wanted to announce, because, and again, I'm doing this for the advantage of our reviser, because there are a lot of things in this bill that, well, there may be, just put aside the fact that you may dislike the bill entirely, but let's just assume that that is here nor there. There are some items in there that we definitely will offer amendments for, and one relates to teacher lesson plans. That's something that I have heard a lot of comments about. So if you have desires to reform the bill relating to teacher lesson plans, the implementation date, the timeline, or specific criteria, it's probably already been submitted. And so I'm giving you that information so that there's not duplicate amendments that are going to bog down Nick. And you're welcome to ask me about any of those that we have caught and we have submitted. Doesn't mean that you can't certainly do, of course, you're going to do your own. But I just, in the event that those are areas of concern that you noticed, I wanted to let you know that they are taken care of. I am also, and you guys all know this, a former teacher. So I am sensitive to that, and that was not the intent of the drafting. So with that, committee, Representative Nguyen, do you have anything you want to add before we adjourn?
No, but tomorrow, how about if I reserve the right to maybe add something tomorrow if I think of something or might?
Well, committee members always have that opportunity to do that, and you just have to let me know. I'd be happy to allow for that. All right, committee, thank you for joining us today and guests, and we are adjourned.